Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and we're going to be looking at Photoshop. So here we go, part 2 of GIF animations. Let me launch the chat pod, pull this down. Now I apologize. I'm working with a pretty big screen. I know I've said this before, but I want to repeat it. I've got good size real estate. Should be working on dual monitors. That's my bad. Um, I can't see everyone's faces right now. So if you unmute, and I hope you do, I might not know who it is. So if you want to just say, hey, this is Kelly, or hey, this is Nayeli, I've got a question. That way I'll just know who I'm talking to. It doesn't really matter if you do that or not. I'll answer the question regardless. But if you want me to address you personally, just say your name. All right, so here we go. We've got a little happy Halloween. Move this over a bit. All right, so we did a ball bounce last week, came out okay. It was fine. What if we want to do something, and I do not want to say this is more complicated because it's not, but we're working with some typography, we're working with some imagery, and what we've got here is, let's just take a look at the groups here. Groups are very important when it comes to GIFs, and I'll explain that as we go. So I'm just going to turn the visibility off of 2 and 3, and let's just take a look at 1. Twirl down 1, what do we got here? We've got an image. Okay, so those are our pumpkins, great. And then we've got a piece of typography. Great, okay, straightforward. What does group 2 look like? All right, well, group 2, I can see that the type has gone to white, fair enough. And if I look close, I can see that there are some different things going on inside the jack-o'-lanterns. And all of those things would be a brush. So all I did was I grabbed a yellow color. I think it's a bit small. Grabbed a yellow color, B for brush, expand my brush out a little bit. Looks like I got a nice soft edge brush, work with a lower opacity here. And I'm just going to tap a couple times to make the eyes glow a little bit more. So just tap over here, tap, maybe over the teeth, tap, and maybe one up here, tap. All right, so layer 1, layer 2. So there's a little bit more luminosity coming out of the eyes. Great. Let's see what group 3 looks like. All right, the type has changed color yet again, and it looks like the glow has kind of taken place in a different spot. All right, so you kind of get the drift of where this is going. We're just going to cycle these 3 groups. All right, so why did I not do this on, say, layers instead of groups? Totally could. Layer management, when you're dealing with GIFs, gets pretty complicated, especially the more stuff that you're trying to animate. So in this particular instance, not only is the jack-o'-lanterns kind of lighting up in different manners, but the type is reacting as well. So 2 things are going on simultaneously in each particular frame. This would require me at a minimum of having 2, 4, 6 different layers. That's not unfathomable. However, if I had 6 more frames, start doing the math, you're going to wind up with a lot of layers. And figuring out which layer was on, which layer was off, no way, this type goes with this, no, this goes with this, that gets to be a real headache. So take my advice, group these things. Think of your groups as frames. So I even labeled them 1, 2, 3, frame 1, 2, 3. Everything that's going to animate goes in that group. So if I've got a character and say the hair is blowing, maybe I have the character's face, hairs on one layer, capes on one layer, debris blowing by is on one layer. All that stuff would go into one group. And then I could even go so far as just to duplicate the group and then tweak things. I could use, the warp tool to kind of like move the hair around. I could use a new brush to kind of push the debris around. I could use liquify to kind of move the cape around, duplicate that group, and then just kind of rinse and repeat. All that stuff stays in the group. That way, when I go to the timeline, I'm really just focusing in on the groups. Last time, I think we just duplicated the ball 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, give or take, or maybe we're just kind of like moving it around. You can do that, but be warned, you can run into some issues. And I'm going to show you, because I brought up transformation already, I'm going to show you the problem with transformations. But on to this. All right, so I think I'm prepped. I'm curious to see what this looks like. Part of this project is going to be the review process. Do not assume just because you think you've set up everything correctly, it's going to behave correctly. You always want to play test this thing, probably play test it multiple times. Remember, to see your timeline, you're going to go to Window, Timeline. Now, because this was already set up, it's already got 3 keyframes in here. So if you're following along or just paying attention, what I would ask is that you trash 2 of these out. So I'm going to trash 1, trash 2. And I'm just hitting the little trash can icon, just like that. Now, when you get down to frame 1, your trash can becomes ghosted. Why? You always have to have a frame in your timeline. Always. That's just like the way it's got to be. Cool. All right. So this could be frame 1, or I could change it around. Well, I do want 3 frames. So in order to kind of like build this up from scratch, we're just going to go ahead and hit the plus 2 more times. Boom, boom. We're going to actually make a 4th frame, and we'll duplicate a group, but we'll do that at the end. If we play this right now, let's say, all right, I prepped this thing. This looks great. I know exactly what's going to happen. And I hit play. You'll see that it is, in fact, playing, but not much is happening here. So let me hit stop on the playhead and kind of figure out what's going on. Yes, we've got 3 frames. Yes, we've got 3 different groups, but nothing's happening here. Anybody have any clue? Anybody want to take a stab at why we're not seeing that glow and the type changing colors? I'd like to say this is an important concept, but the reality is this is like the only concept. So this is important. And it's okay if you don't know. I'm just curious if anybody picked up on what I did wrong here.
You only duplicate one group?
It's close. My groups actually are all different. To prove it, let me hit group 2 and let me hit group 3. So they are different. Fortunately, I'm not seeing a whole lot happen. So I moved a little too fast, and I guess I missed a step. So I need to go back and make sure that I hit this step. So does anybody want to take one more crack at it? I'll give you a hint. It involves these right here. I guess you can think of these as keyframes. I'm not sure technically they would be keyframes, but well, maybe they are. Check this out. This is keyframe 1. This is keyframe 2. This is keyframe 3. Keyframes look very identical, right? Here's what's going on. You need to physically tell Photoshop what to be on each keyframe. And as I scrub through 1, 2, and 3, take a look at my layers over here. You can see that layer 1 is visible, or group 1, I'm sorry, group 1 is visible. In frame 1, group 1 is visible. In frame 2, group 1 is visible. In frame 3, group 1 is visible. That's the problem. It's an easy fix. If you want this to be at frame 1, great, it already is. However, in frame 2, I don't want to see this. So I'm going to turn the visibility of group 1 off. And I'm going to turn the visibility of group 2 on. I'm going to jump over to frame 3, turn off group 1, and turn on group 3. Now it's set to 0 seconds, so it's going to happen so fast that I think Zoom might kind of glitch out a little bit. It might look weird. So I'm going to select all of these by holding the Shift key, dropping the 0 second down to say 0.2 seconds, and let's give that a play. It's working now. Here's the takeaway, and it's a very big takeaway. We'll talk about this. We'll continue to talk about this tonight. if you want something new to appear or react or do something different, that thing needs to be visible or enacted on that frame via the layers. All right, so I think that's moving a bit slow. So let me grab these again, drop that down to 1 second, hit play. All right. Seems to be working fine. Little seizure-y. I don't know, might be a bit too much. All right, so that works. And we'll talk about how to export that after we add a new frame. How to add a new frame? Well, we just did. I'm going to go to frame 3. I'm going to click a new frame. Why did it pick this frame? Why this one as opposed to this one or this one? The reason is when you add something new, it's just going to recycle the last thing that it was. So in this case, frame 4 is just a one-to-one instance of frame 3 until we tell it to be something different. So what I could do is I could take group 3, could right click, and I could duplicate the group. I'm going to turn off, actually, I got to be careful. And this is where things can go a little bit haywire. So be careful. Just dealing with layers, that's manageable. You know, if like a layer's not working or you can't figure a layer out, you can just go through and visibility, visibility, visibility until you find what you're looking for. Frames are weird because they not only directly reference the layers or the groups, but their visibility at that moment in time. So I have to be very careful because right now, if I do something, it's going to affect frame 3. For this particular animation, it probably wouldn't make much of a difference because there's no like rhyme or reason to the color or, you know, it's not like the light is going from left to right. But if you're doing something like a run cycle or a head turn or a ball bounce, and you put a frame in at the wrong time, suddenly you're going to see that ball bounce, bounce, jump back, bounce, bounce. You know what I mean? It's going to snap back in time. So always kind of, if you can, be forward thinking and say, all right, this needs to come after that previous frame, and this needs to come after that previous frame, and so forth and so on. Occasionally, you will have to go back and fine tune these things, and you will have to go back and find, you know, where that frame was out of place a little bit. And that's okay. That happens, but know that. All right, so I'm going to go to frame 4. I'm going to work, double click here. I'll call this group 4. I can turn the visibility of group 3 off. I don't need that. And I can see that this piece of type has a color overlay. Well, maybe I'll just double click. I'll change purple to a light purple. Turn the stroke off. Choose OK. And as far as the glow goes, there's not much I can do because I already kind of painted on this. So I'll just paint a couple more. Maybe I'll add a little bit of orange this time. Whoa. On the wrong layer. We talked about this, and the only reason I bring it up is it's a cool effect. But if you're trying to paint light, a blend mode that works really well if you're painting on the layer is linear dodge. So we'll definitely brighten it up to kind of take advantage of what those pumpkins would look like. All right, so now that we've got that frame set up, let's we're at 0.1 second. Let's give it a play. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. So what happened there? Type looks okay for, well, actually it doesn't. Type is going between 2 colors. And the pumpkins aren't doing anything. They were just doing something before. So how did I mess this up? Let's do this. I'll go back to frame 1. Look at my layers. Does anything look out of order there? Does anything look messed up? Go to frame 2.
Layer 4 is on.
That's right. Layer 4 was left on when I designed right here. And as it jumped back to the beginning, it never got turned off. So this is going to happen to you. So get used to it. You're going to have to go back and say, all right, well, frame 1 was group 1. I'll turn frame 4 off. I'll go to frame 2. Frame 2 looks good. Frame 3 looks good. Now frame 4 went away. Turn frame 4 back on. Let's give it another shot. Better. So I'm really glad that happened. That was an accident, but a very happy accident, because you're going to see that. You're going to forget that something's enabled. You're not going to know where it's at. You're going to have to go frame by frame. And this reiterates the reason I think groups are so important. If I had 30 layers out here and I'm trying to figure out, oh, which piece of type was that and which pumpkins were that, that's a mess. That's a big, big mess. You can color code them, you can name them, you can link them together. I've done it all. Trust me when I say grouping them is the best, easiest, fastest way to just say, oh, that's the one. Make it easy on yourself. Just name them sequentially. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. However many frames you got, dump it all in there. That way it's a real quick fix to say, all right, frame 3 looks weird. Nothing's happening there. Turn everything off except for group 3, and you should be in good shape. So good. I'm glad that somebody caught that. All right. At some point, you will be done. We need to shoot this thing out in a way that respects the fact that it is a GIF. And then you should play test it in a browser. This is kind of in my experience, the most fun part that students have, because they actually get to see what it looks like in a browser. This is not hard to do, but we do need to make sure that we do it right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File. Now, if you were working 10 years ago, you could go to Save As, and you could just pick a GIF. But that was 10 years ago. File, Save As, or it looks like they don't even have it anymore. There used to be, if you follow old tutorials, I've got an old tutorial on Vimeo of this. It's probably when I was at COD. It's totally defunct now because there was a export for web feature. And that's how you would do this. You would export it as a GIF, and you choose all these settings and stuff like that. Well, that's no longer an option anymore. So how do we do it? It's now located under Export. There's your save for web legacy. We could export as or save for web legacy. Either one of these will work. I would highly recommend you choose save for web. The reason for this is you get one more round of review, and you can kind of catch any mistakes that you might have made. Maybe you're moving kind of quick and you just missed something in here. Saving for web will give you that one last shot of like a safety net, be like, oh yeah, there's something still off here, so I need to fix that. So we're going to go to export, save for web legacy. I always think it's kind of funny. Some of these hotkeys, the whole point of a hotkey or a keyboard shortcut is that it saves time, right? You know, like Control S, pinky and thumb, boom. Control Z, pinky and thumb, boom. Some of these hotkeys get so complicated that you would have to like move your fingers in such a way, you know, like a guitarist, in like this really weird crab shape to hit those 4 hotkeys. I guess what I'm saying is it's faster just to go to export, save for web, as opposed to like remember this crazy combination. But Alt, Shift, Control S. It's going to bring up a dialog box. Now yours might not look like this. You've got a few different flavors to choose from here. You could export it as a JPEG. Real quick rundown of file types. JPEG would just be for static images. They're good for the web because they are very, very compressed. They still retain quite a bit of information, but you can really squeeze down the file size and still look okay. Cool. Ping. Also good. Some people use them for print. I don't know why. In fact, I take that back. People that don't really know what they're doing use them for print. You shouldn't use them. You can print them, but what a ping is good at is it retains transparency. So if I had the checkerboard pattern in here and wanted to keep something on a transparent background, ping's great. The bump or the WBMP, don't really see bumps much anymore. This was big with 3D modelers when you do like bump maps and things like that. But I don't see this extension much anymore. So we can kind of forget that. One that we're going to concern ourselves with is here at the top is GIF. So if you don't see GIF, make sure that you choose this drop down and choose GIF. Don't worry about the presets. If you want to see what's in here, okay, boom, 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 boom. All this is doing is saying, hey, there are different compressions of JPEG where I can make your file size much teenier, but I'm going to chuck out a lot of information. Same thing with a GIF. The bigger the number, the more colors you have, smaller the number, fewer colors you have. And what that equals is file size or speed through bandwidth. You can just leave this alone. All right, so we've got GIF. You don't really need to worry about selective diffusion. Colors is going to be kind of important. Let me zoom out a little bit. All right, this is the full complement of colors that a GIF could possibly have. And this is how a GIF compresses. It's based off of whole colors, not in-betweens. So there's that number again. We talked about this, I think in like week 2 when we were talking about levels. Talk about that magic number 256. And I said, you know, why is pure white 255? And the answer was, well, black is a whole number. That counts as 0. So here's your 256. Here's your 256 color palette. These are all the colors in this animation right now. Now, to be fair, this original image had more colors than this. GIF can't support that, but it's still not bad. It looks pretty good. If you were curious, though, and said, all right, well, right now, I can get this thing down to 1.34 megabytes. That's pretty tiny. And over a 56K modem, which nobody uses anymore, this should take 251 seconds to play out, which is not right at all. It's actually much, much smaller than that. But check this out. You could drop this color down. We'll half it. So go to 128. And what I want you to be looking at here is the quality of the graphic. If I chuck out half the colors, it goes down to this. Now that doesn't look terrible, but take a look at what happened. Look at some of these pumpkins. You guys have seen images like this on the web before. This is a very, very typical GIF overcompressed where you don't get artifacts like you would a JPEG. JPEG gets those kind of like squared edges around the outside. This will just turn into like dots. It almost looks like halftone or something. And to go further with it, if you can't see it, let's go all the way down to like something severe like 4. Whoa. That's what 8 colors look like. And these are the 8 colors that we're working with. It got 1 orange, 1 yellow, 1 white, and a bunch of different blacks. Stylistically, maybe you really like it. I think it looks bad. So I'm going to bring that back up to the full 256. All right. Here's what I was saying that you can preview it where you export it out. Here's your little playhead. Seems to be working okay to me. Hit stop. Now we're going to save. Last thing that we need to talk about is we've told it what to be. Now I'm going to tell it where to go, and I'm going to tell it how to package everything together. So downloads, I don't think it's the best spot for it, but that's fine. I would recommend creating a folder and calling it GIF because you're going to end up dumping a few things in here. Double click on your newly created folder. Here you go. You've got HTML and images. Images only. HTML only. What is all this stuff? Choose HTML and images. What this is going to give you is it's going to give you your GIF, which you will submit. And it's also going to give you a little HTML document. Depending on the browser that is associated with your computer, mine's Chrome, it should look like a little Chrome icon. Let's try. HTML and images, I'll name it Gifs fine and choose save. It shouldn't take very long, even if you've got something quite big. These things are pretty quick. Let's take a look at what we created here. If I can just share my screen. Great. All right, so hopefully you guys are seeing still Photoshop. Looks like you are. All right, so I'm going to go to my downloads. Here's that folder GIF. So in here, there's that little Chrome file. I'll open this in a second. Inside of my images folder, because remember it was images and HTML. Double click this. Here's your GIF. This is what you will submit in addition to your PSD. So if I double click this, now this is like preview or something like that. Great, seems to be working okay. But if I wanted to see what this would look like on the web, back out of your folder, open your HTML document. And there you go. I can see it's actually pretty big. Maybe a little bit too big for the web. But it works, looks pretty good. That's it. Nice thing about having that HTML file is you can embed that right into a website or any type of social media blast. It'll work. I've never seen anybody not be able to load a GIF file. HTML5 is extremely hospitable to these type of files. So if you want to get this thing online, and I encourage you to, go ahead. All right, I'm going to jump back to Photoshop now. All right, how did everyone feel about that? Does that make sense? Does that process make sense? Does anybody have questions on it? Do we need to see that again? I've got a few other files that one thing I do want to do is I want to show you why you don't want to transform something. So maybe we'll move on to that. If you have any questions, if you need to see things as you're putting yours together, start testing it, find out where the idiosyncrasies are, the quirks, let me know. We can kind of solve them together because I don't want to just leave you on this desert island and be like, well, good luck trying to figure it out. I'll close this out. What I've got here is a head turn reference. So if I was teaching animation, your first project would be a squash and stretch, aka a ball bounce. It teaches you physics, kinetics, inertia, and keyframes and tweens. Great. Then we move on to more of a drawing exercise, which would be a head turn. Now, I have long since lost my jump drives that have my head turn sketches on them. I know they're online somewhere, but I'm not going to go out and just draw a bunch of heads. So I found a little primer here with some animator that's got a little head turn. These are kind of nice exercises. If you just Google head turn template, you'll find something like this. What you can do is you can use this to test out your animation chops. So what I'll do is I'll just click, hold, and drag, hit Control C to copy, and then I'm going to hit Control N to create a new document. And this new document it's basically what's saying is like, do you want it to be the size of the clipboard? Do you want this new document to be the size of that marquee selection you just made? And I do. I can hit Control V. All right, I'm just going to grab 3 or 4 heads. Grab this one, Control C, Control V. And I'm kind of skipping every other. Control V. Control C. Control V. Next thing that I would want to do is I would want to change the opacity, because if I just real quick play this through, I'm going to create a frame animation, and it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Create frame animation. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I was just say, all right, on frame 1, I want layer 1. Great. Go to frame 2, turn on frame 2, go to frame 3, turn on layer 3, go to frame 4, turn on layer 4, and then play it. I mean, it works-ish. 0 seconds is a bit fast, so let's slow that down. See what it looks like a little bit slowed. So you get the general idea here. Yeah, the head is turning, but it's not so much the head is turning. It's almost like they're sitting on a swivel chair like this, and this is happening. Now, this is not an animation class, so I don't want to get into all the minutia of how mechanics, how the human body moves. But I will say this. Some of you, maybe a lot of you, are going to be using humanoid-ish type figures, and they're going to be moving in a natural manner. When that happens, especially say a head turn, your head doesn't just swivel. You know, we're not G.I. Joe figures. What happens is you drop your head down, and then it kind of comes back up. And as it does that, the whole profile moves. That's what's happening here. And that's why I need to really drop the opacity down of these. This is a term that's referred to as onion skinning. Think about it. You guys have all ate an onion or seen an onion at least. You know that there are several layers, and those layers are semi-translucent. So all onion skinning says is make your different illustrations low opacity so you can kind of see through them. That way you can gauge registration. All registration is the lining of things up. All right, so what I'll do is I will grab all these layers, turn the visibility on, and I'm going to drop them down to about 30% opacity, 40% opacity. Now, my timeline's totally messed up now. I'm at frame 3. I got a bunch of different opacities here, and if I hit play, it looks pretty weird. So I need to go back and redo this entire animation. Fortunately, it's just 4 frames. That's not going to be difficult. So let me go ahead and hit stop. All I really want to do right now is I want to make sure that things are kind of lined up. So frame 1 is on. Frame 2, you can see it went back to 100% opacity. How did that happen? It's because at frame 2, it was at 100% opacity. And here's where things start to get a little bit weird. So I'm just going to go ahead and trash these frames out. They're just going to cause more problems than they're going to solve. So trash that out. And as I do this, some of my layers might react a little bit weird. All right, let's prep this thing for real now. Get these 4 frames, drop the opacity down. And I just want to work with layer 1 and layer 2. Layer 2, hit V, kind of move this over. That looks pretty good. The neck is relatively in the same place, but you can see the eyes are starting to move around. So that looks nice. I'll turn on frame 3. Frame 3 is out of whack. It's way too far to the left. So I'm going to take layer 3, move that over. So to nudge it up a little bit, because as your neck starts to turn around, it starts to raise up, even if you're looking down. And the last frame, frame 4. Now I'll take everything and just nudge it over to the left a bit. Okay, that looks pretty decent. I'll pull the opacity of everything back up to 100. Turn these off. So this is my frame 1, and I got a little bit of garbage that came with it. All right. Add a new frame. This will be layer 2. Add a new frame. This will be layer 3. Add a new frame, and this will be layer 4. It's set to 0.2 seconds for the duration. And I'll hit play. Much more smooth. Could it use some in-betweens? You bet. But you get the drift that that head is starting to turn. So from here, what I would do is I would in between frame 1 and 2, frame 2 and 3, 3 and 4 to create a much more fluid and smooth motion. Let's say for a second that I want to return from the profile back. How do I do that? Well, it's pretty simple. We're just going to add 2 more frames. Boom, boom. I ended with layer 4. So frame 5 is going to be layer 3. Frame 6 is going to be layer 2. Now, question. Should I add layer 1? What happens if I do? Is that a good idea? Is that a bad idea? Is it irrelevant idea? Does anybody have an idea what would happen if, because this thing does loop. By default, it wants to loop. And that's fine. You usually do want Gifs to loop. You can have them play just once or twice. I'll show you how to do that in a second, but this thing's going to loop. If I add 1 more frame here and put frame 1, layer 1, is that going to mess things up or is it going to be okay? You got a 50-50. Anybody want to guess? I'll give you a hint. It'll look weird. Anybody have any idea why it's not going to work right? I mean, it'll still be a GIF. It's just not going to look correct. What's the thing that you
Because
need?
it goes back to the original position.
Right. So if I add 1 more frame here, and I'll go ahead and do it, and I make this layer 1, here's what's happening. It starts here, goes to here, 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 starts to come back, and then it hits the end point, which is really the beginning point. So when it goes here, you get 2 frames of this. So you're going to get a head turn, it's going to come back, and then it's going to stick here. And then it's going to go back, it's going to come here, and it's going to stick here. Now, if that's what you want, if you want a little pause, cool. Yeah, I mean, you did it. But I want really kind of a fluid back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. So I will trash layer 7 out, frame 7, and let's try that. And there we go. All right, so about that looping, what's that about? Right here is your duration. You can have it set to just do it once. You can have it set to do 3 times, forever, or let's say, you know what, I'm kind of a 7 person. I think 7's a good number. You can just do custom and plug in whatever you want. I'm here to tell you, though, that most GIFs loop indefinitely. Because if you just do it 3 times, it stands to reason that someone could open a browser, be talking, not see it, and then come back and look down, and then it's over. But if it loops forever, you're always going to see it. So try to think about something that the beginning is the end, and then you just get this nice cyclical loop. All right, last thing that I want to talk about is this danger of transformation. Close this thing out. Close this out. If you want to see some good locomotion studies, this is a artist by the name of, I think it's actually pronounced Edvard, but most people just say Edward Muybridge. He was a photographer around the turn of the century, I think. And his whole bag was just, it was weird. Like he fancied himself a fine artist, but really a lot of his work ended up being more like of the scientific journaling, where you guys maybe have seen this image before, where it's a horse in motion. Cool side story about this. The reason that this came to be is 2 people were talking and they were arguing, betting on whether or not when a horse is in full gallop, do all 4 hooves leave the ground at once? Is there ever a point in time where the horse is completely airborne? One person said yes, one person said no, but there was no way to settle it really, because our eyes, we talk about persistence of vision. You can't, when a horse is galloping, it's anybody's guess. So Muybridge got this really cool idea, and his tech has influenced, we still use it in Hollywood. Like if you've seen The Matrix, they do that 360 bullet time gimmick, where like Trinity jumps up in the air and the camera. It's the same stuff that he was using, same exact thing. What he did is he just set up this giant canvas along a wall with these grids here. And he had, well, at least 1, 2, 3, 3. He had at least 12 cameras, but it was probably more like 100 cameras. And all the cameras were attached to a little string, kind of at ground level. So as the horse ran by, it would snap the string, camera would take a shot, and then he would just go by and develop all the different pieces of film. And this is what he wound up with. And then, yes, true to form, a horse does indeed become airborne during a full gallop. But these are really important artifacts because they've taught science and art a lot about how, I mean, he did hundreds of these things, like all kinds of stuff. It wasn't just horses, it was any animal he could find that would walk a straight line. He would have humans carry pots upstairs. He would have babies crawl. He would have people go backwards. He would have gymnasts. Just Google Edward Muybridge locomotion studies. There's tons and tons of these things, but pretty fascinating. But as an animator, you can actually get quite a bit of value out of it to understand, like, oh, when a person, walks, when their legs are apart, what's called the passing position, their hips are a little bit lower to the ground. Well, that makes sense because when they're right here, they're standing more erect. So as people walk, it's not just a straight line. They kind of bounce a little bit. And, we don't really know those type of things until we see it literally in black and white in this case, over a series of photographs. So if you're struggling, I don't think looking at Muybridge would be a bad thing. I've done a couple animations just based off of his plates, like people dancing. There's like some slow dances, some spins and stuff like that. Those are fun to kind of draw on, like a rotoscope. So can kind of get some ideas just from those. But let's do a new file and we'll take a break after this. Make sure that you're staying in pixels for this project. Do not use inches. It's going to be way too big. Now, the actual dimensions, I can't really tell you. If you think you want to print this thing, fine. You can start in inches. Let me know. We need to downsample before you start to animate. All right, so I'll do 500 pixels by 500 pixels. It needs to be 72 DPI. I'm not totally sure you can even spit out a GIF if it's anything higher than this. So always stay at 72. And this will be the only project that we do in here at 72 DPI. Okay, so I'm going to do that squash and stretch real quick. So I'm going to use a ball. Here's my yellow ball. Boom. Now, let's pretend for a second that I do this without groups. And I'm not even going to use different layers. I'm just going to use this one ball. We did it last time. I'm going to create a frame animation, and I'm just going to have it drop down and then go back up. So here's my frame 1. Add a new frame. At frame 2, come right here. Frame 3, come right here. Frame 4, back out. Frame 5, almost off. Frame 6, completely off. Slow it down just a little bit. Go to 0.1 second. Comes in a little bit hot, but I think everyone gets the gist here. Now, I realize that what I just did contradicts everything that I said up until this point. Why use groups? Why use multiple layers? I could do all this on one layer. And, if this is what you're trying to go for, which I'd like to see a lot better than this, you could. You absolutely could. However, you might say, well, it's not bad, but first things first, I don't like the fact that it's coming in so hot. So let me create a new frame here. Ooh, stop that. Create a new frame. And here, I'll have it come down just a little bit. See how that looks. Okay, so the smoothness looks a little bit better. I'm down with that. But what would be great is at this contact point, if it's squashed. That's what I really want to see. All right, cool. So at frame 4, I'm going to Control T. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, so I'm just affecting, and I forget they changed that hotkey, so I'm not going to hold down the Shift key. I am going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to squash it, just like that. So that's a nice, you can see it come in, kind of like squishes down, and it'll pop back up. Hit Enter to apply that, and let's go ahead and play this out. And that's the problem. When you do a transformation, and to take another step forward, if you had a layer style, a drop shadow, stroke, outer glow, you know, the layer effects, that stuff will supersede any of the previous frames. So transformation and layer styles will override anything else and will be there throughout. So the way that I would do this is I would trash everything out. And you better believe that I'm going to make, if nothing else, I would make groups, but just to speed it along, I'm going to make, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do 6 of these. All right, so frame 1 right here. Frame 2, and this is kind of my onion skin here. 2, 3. I'm just doing it all on one layer. Now this one, I can squash a bit. This one, if it's going to be real, it might be a little bit taller. And that's kind of the physics that we're talking about. And then we'll end off screen like that. And then I can actually buttress it with 2 empty frames. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Call this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right now, all the frames are the same. So at frame 1, I don't want anything present. Just turn everything off. Frame 2, layer 1 comes on. And this is why I was saying groups make a lot of sense, because right now ellipse 1 copy, ellipse 1 copy 2 doesn't mean much to anybody, especially me. But frame 3, I can remember it's this. Frame 4 should be my squashed. Frame 5, my oblong, popping back up. Frame 6, about off the board, and frame 7, nothing. So let's see what that looks like now. It's got a little bit more reaction to it. Be careful. If you think that you need to transform something, please take my advice, duplicate it. Because you don't want to do something. I've had students that want to do, you know, just like junky South Park stuff where just, you know, like an arm's on a hinge and it does something like this. So they transform it from here to back here, only to find out that every other instance of that is now back here. So really think about working with groups. Before we take a break, does anybody have any questions? I realize that this isn't, you know, the wheel or fire where it's blowing people's mind, but at the same time, I don't want to discount people that maybe have never used animation before, or Photoshop to use an animation, or just some of the goofiness that can kind of come along with this. So if you've got questions, please ask. All right, let me stop recording. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll meet back in here. I want to hear your ideas because I want to start hopefully giving you some guidance. Some of you probably have started. I'd love to see where you're at. And for the exact same reason, just to kind of point you in the right direction. I don't want this one to get off the rails. It's going to be it's going to take a lot more time to go back and fix these things if they're wrong than any other project that we've done. You know, if you've got a weird mock-up, just find a new mock-up. If your colors look different, change the colors. This, maybe you'll have to start over. So let's get off on the right foot here. All right, it's 7:28. Let's stop this. And paw.